It's a good day. So Bode, you're back. You're back in California from a little bit of a stint, right?
Yeah, we're doing a little California time. It's where we've given birth to the other babies, so we're down here trying to settle in and that's some nesting for my wife, and um, yeah, a little disruptive being that it's in the middle of the school year and all the boys are in their stuff, but it's nice to have some weather anyway, some nice sun.
Absolutely. It's a little different. Ready for ski season? Anything exciting coming up on the ski front side that you want to? As we're waiting for people to jump on. Any
I
up?
mean, we have some cool skis coming out that it's last year I was up there all year in Big Sky, and this is the first year in quite a while where I've had the sense of the fall. I've been up there all the way through the fall, and I start getting pretty fired up for it. Somehow in Southern California, even though I know fall's happening, it doesn't feel like it. So I miss that whole like getting ready for skiing, and then all of a sudden there's just skiing in other places and I just go. So this has been a fun year. The boys have been starting to talk about going skiing and getting fired up for it. In October, we had a bunch of snow. We got like 15, 16 inches at our house and it stayed. So yeah, I'm totally looking forward to the winter, but it is a bit of a culture shock and stuff when you come down here and everyone's freezing cold and it's 58 degrees. So
Exactly. Welcome to the California life. We obviously it's been a minute. We have obviously expanded, and for all of you joining us, we have a lot of ICL students. I see a lot of tennis players. I see skiers. I see some lacrosse players here. Very familiar names, and we also have our sister school joining us as well. We have some students from Dwight Global, which Bode knows well. He's had many a tour through various Dwight campuses. But going back, it's interesting. ICL is actually celebrating its 20th year anniversary this year, and I would say, Bode, you and I first met, pretty much a couple of years after ICL started, and I remember talking to you about, you were full swing, gearing up for Olympics, but you always gravitated towards the mission of ICL. You always said, giving back to kids, sharing your experiences was always really important to you. And kind of want to open it up. Today, we're going to do a lot of Q&A, but I just thought it'd be good time to kind of reflect on now. It was very different nearly 20 years ago when we were first talking, that now we both have our own children, and it rings a lot more true. But, what was it about originally the ICL, that concept of kind of engagement and application and the 6 Ps of, turn your passion to purpose? What struck with you, and you can kind of go from there.
yeah, I mean, it was honestly so many similarities between how I grew up at Tamarack Tennis Camp, and how often, our tennis camp was 2 1-month sessions, and then we typically bolted on a soccer camp after that for 10 days or 2 weeks with my uncle, which was markedly less fun, but was still really productive. And how often, all the way through my camper phase into my counselor phase, till I was running the camp as the director for a few years, how often everyone was like, damn, I wish we could just do this all year. Like, why don't you guys just have an academic program and do this? And I was like, well, that's what an academy is, except you're right. It's nowhere near as fun or as engaging or as sort of complete in terms of how it builds the character of the kids. They have jobs every morning. We don't have like a maintenance crew at the camp. It's just everybody does their part, and it builds this really cool accountability and interactivity and responsibility for the group. And all the kids are waiters in the morning. They set the tables in the morning for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They have lunch crew. They do everything. And a lot of these kids, that's the first time they've done that. That feel and that concept is very much what, you and I spoke about in the beginning, is having a school that just, of course, it's not the same thing, but a lot of the concepts are the same, is just bringing in the academic part, making that, super high level, but then building out the sort of broader curriculum that brings kids to their best type of person, with responsibility and self-reliance and self-motivation, time management, all those things. And it was such a big part of my upbringing and my family's sort of heritage in New Hampshire. And yeah, that's what it got me excited about it, because we had talked about that. I mean, even the adults were like, I would do this year round. And I think that has some real merit to it.
It's so true. And you've obviously joined and hosted webinars and seen the growth of, this concept. We didn't have the opportunity, but, academics blended with kind of character, those quote unquote soft skills that are so critical to you. I mean, you lived and have still living a very unique life in goal setting and sort of finding your own path to those. So I guess, as we get started and we talk about, the P's, what it means to them, having Monica Seles last week, having, you obviously have a big tennis background, but we have had webinars with, Grammy winning music producers, and the themes are also similar. And we always talk about that the overlap, if you were advising, assuming that kids were of all different disciplines, are there certain motivational factors that kind of drive you on the mental side, like to succeed? Because your life was unique, right? You didn't just wake up and say, I'm going to be the best skier. I mean, you did so many things. And how did you create that champion mindset? And then we'll talk about how you created a process for yourself, because that, how do we go from passion to purpose to process?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I think we've talked about it, some of the adversity that I faced as a young person was just, it was the reality of my life. My parents worked. I had to hitch rides with other people to ski races, and I just liked what I did. And again, I had a mentor and my grandmother who was really fantastic at communicating and just kind of broke it down, I guess, in a way that I understood at 7 or 8 years old. But I always felt pretty independent. And I think my culture of New Hampshire, my parents, they were supportive of that independence. And that's a huge part of this is giving kids that freedom. I mean, I ended up at CVA, and we talked about some of the adversity that I had there being a day student and having to kind of take on a pretty aggressive travel program, just getting to and from school, and my living situation as a day student when all the other kids were in the dorm. Those things in hindsight were really impactful because they let me develop that already kind of innate independence. And I would say that almost all the kids I see, whether it's at Tamarack, at my tennis camp, or helping coaching, the little bits of coaching I do at my school with my kids now, all kids have this natural independence, a natural defiance to being told what to do. I mean, as a parent, right? I mean, every kid kind of wants to figure it out on their own and do it on their own. I think the more chances you have to do that, the better. And certainly CVA was a great tool for me to get the volume of skiing I needed. But I absolutely wish that I had something like ICL where I could have pursued a higher level of academics and had that sort of integrated independence, especially the time management thing. That took me a long time to grow into the self-motivation and time management that was required to be successful academically and athletically. And I think had I developed that earlier, I would have been ahead of where I was. I would have evolved as an athlete much earlier. Because one thing that you and I talk about a bunch is that most kids think like academics is like a thing that your parents want you to do or you have to do, and then your athletics is something that you love and you pursue. And the reality is that the same skills that make you a good student, that allow you to learn information, take information in, process it, manage your time effectively, are all the things that make you great as an athlete. So being a better student will 100% with every single person out there make them a better athlete. And often the other way around. As I got better at athletics, it translated to better academic performance. And that was just because I started to understand the details. I started to understand you couldn't just skip a bunch of stuff and think you were going to jump in the start gate and do great. You had to do all the things leading up to it. And that's similar to a test, right? In school, you can't just believe you're smart enough and wing it. but I do think that one of the challenges that kids face now is that massive amount of input, right? Everything's so free flowing information, and they're exposed to a lot of stuff, and they sort of, I think, maybe expect things to work in a different way. And any pursuit of excellence, whether it's sports, academics, music, arts of any sort, it's a long journey. And I think, to me, that's what those P's mean, is like, in a sense, each one you have to allocate a pretty significant amount of time to. And because there's 5, 6, right, we're adding more, we're going to get up to 7 or 8. You have to sort of accept the fact that, like, you're going to have ups and downs, and you're going to have these waning moments where your motivation is down, or all these things. And that's where I think having a good, clean view of it from the beginning, of like, look, if I'm going to be fair to myself, I gotta know that I'm going to have these weaker moments and lack of motivation, and I got to give myself a decent chunk of time to grow into it and sort of see this through. And I think that kind of determination or vision forward, and it's probably the biggest challenge for young people, because their whole life is so short at that point. And it's hard to think of, like, having to wait 7 years to figure out if you're going to be good at your sport or good at your passion. But the reality is, in my opinion, if you're doing it right, you never waste those 7 years, because you're enjoying so much and getting so much out of the process that inevitably, whatever you choose to do later, you're going to have this massive foundation of enjoyment, success, knowing yourself, just from pursuing something that you really care about. That regard, if you're good or not, or if you end up being a professional or not, you're miles ahead of everybody else.
Which is such, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. I mean, I guess, there's no, like you said, there's no secret sauce to it, but I think creating a process, and I'm going to bring some people up this time to ask some questions, because I know you like them fired at you. So we already have a couple typed in here, and then we'll kind of get back to, like, a lot of the questions around mental toughness, preparation, the things that everyone wants to ask you. So Casey or John, whoever's on there, do you want to come on? I know you have a good question about being a mom of 2 racers. Do you want to come up and ask Bode your question? Caitlin, can she? All right, we're pulling them up, and Joa, you're up next, and then Nicola, we'll get to you as well as Isabella.
And I see Beatrice Badino asked about the individual aspects. I have gone over in the interim, I have gone over that a bit, but the reality is I was uniquely positioned to sort of accept that pressure or criticism. I love the individual aspect, right? I played tennis from when I was born, and then I played soccer and several team sports at a high level as well. And that was one of the really hard things, was I tended to bring really good intensity to everything I did. And regardless of whether we were losing 5-0 or not in the soccer game, I was charging. And that was really frustrating, watching my teammates kind of just deflate and put in a really minimal effort. So skiing had that special appeal that ultimately I was the only one controlling it. I wasn't even in tennis. You had to play against the person on the other side of the net. And if it was somebody like Kirk and he was pushing the ball back to you all the time, it became really frustrating, and I couldn't play my best. And skiing, it was, even though you're competing against other racers, ultimately it's a time trial. Nobody affects you from when you leave the gate till you get to the finish line. And that was really important to me, that I owned the whole process there. And the pressure from coaches, I sort of just said, hey, give me time. I suck right now. We'll see in 10 years. That was really my mantra from when I was 8 or 9 years old until I was 20. And I sort of set that goal of 21 years old, and ultimately had to take some risk within that. I mean, I skipped my collegiate opportunities to pursue it, but I had a good, strong belief that I could accomplish stuff. And again, that it comes down to that self-belief a lot of the time.
Oh, it's so great. And now we have, I think that's Casey there, but I will say it's interesting, when you first heard that mantra, I remember playing tennis with you, and I said ICL was to, dare to dream and have the courage to take risks, and then show your leadership through action. And like, you kind of embodied that, saying, look, I know it's just setting it up here, but I'm willing to risk that. And, I'm not going to talk a lot about it. I'll just use my actions to show. So it's pretty great. Well, Casey, welcome. You guys are there. We have a question. Do you want to have your son ask? Would you like to ask?
Yeah.
Welcome.
Okay. I'm here with Cameron. Can you guys hear us?
Yep.
Yeah. Hi,
Bode.
Hi.
We're Aspen skiers, so we know Jono well. So my question is I have two boys that are racers, one going into U16, one U14, first year, both pretty good skiers. But they're both have had pretty substantial injuries. My 9-year-old has already had an ACL tear, and they've got speed events in their head right now. And I just wonder if you had any advice. My oldest one's not thrilled about downhill, and my youngest one, who's a phenomenal skier, is I think got super G in his head now. Just wondering what your advice may be.
Yeah.
So you're so good at it.
Yeah, it's that's the hardest part of being the parent of a skier, is that there's just no gentle way to pursue excellence in skiing. You're gonna have crashes. In my opinion, the most important thing, and I'll say it once. Hopefully, Kirk can leave a link or something on there. Get a Be Strong kit. It's called Be Strong. The letter B Strong. .training is the website where you can order it. It's a modernized version of Katsu, which is an old Japanese training methodology. It's kind of like blood flow restriction. So you put these little blood pressure cuffs on your arms, and then you do really light stuff. So you'll curl tennis balls, for instance. And after you put them on there, and you pump them up with air, and they get pretty tight, but you still have blood flow, but somewhat restricted blood flow. And you can do them in the morning and afternoon every day. And in 2014, when I had my back surgery, I wasn't allowed to lift anything heavier than a gallon of milk for 8 weeks. So, because I had double microdiscectomy, I'd never done it before. I'd always used Be Strong as long as I'd known about it, which at that time was probably 8 or so years, but I'd never done exclusively Be Strong. I'd always mixed it in with my plyos and weightlifting and all the other stuff. And at this point, I couldn't do anything else. So I just did it. I ended up, after a few days, felt good and started doing 2 a day. So I'd do 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. And I got unbelievable strong in a really short period of time, because you can stuff so much work because you're not damaging the muscle. So, but within not damaging the muscle, you're still giving your body the physiological feedback of a max weight workout. So there's ones for your arms, and then separately you have ones for your legs. And but the good thing is, because you're not doing damage to the muscles, you still grow muscle, you still grow muscle mass, you grow strength and endurance and all that, and blood volume. But your body goes and actually prepares your joint surfaces, ligaments, tendons, muscle attachments for more, as it would if you lifted weights too. But as you know, at younger ages, you can't go doing max weight workouts. It's just a terrible plan. You beat your body. Everyone who does that beats their body up disproportionately for what they get out of it. Yes, you get stronger, but ultimately you're crushing your body. And when you're older, you'll pay the price. In the meantime, there's no way for your ligaments, tendons, and joint attachments to grow as quickly as your muscles do. So you end up kind of exposing yourself to this awkward phase where you're super strong, but your joints aren't strong enough to support that. And that, for me, that's the most obvious solution for young guys is just doing that all the time, and do all sorts of different, internal rotations where you sit and rotate your feet up, all the little muscles that are in your hips and knees and legs that you don't necessarily use in a linear fashion, but in skiing, you use those all the time. Use those as much as you use your quads or your glutes. But besides getting really fit, and my opinion, there's zero reason to do anything except Be Strong. Maybe, obviously anaerobic stuff if you wanted to, but in terms of actually getting your body prepared physically, that Be Strong is the most revolutionary training methodology I've ever seen, and especially because you can use it for such younger kids. I mean, I use it. My 8-year-old uses it, and it's, I would never let him lift weights at this age.
Yep, this is not an infomercial for Be Strong, neither ICL nor actually. But it does it. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for the question. We're going to bring up Isabella now. Isabella, if you want to ask Bode your question. I think you and Leah had a very similar similar question. So Isabella, we will bring you up right now, and I'm going to try to combine because a lot of people have kind of similar questions. A lot of different sports, different athletes. We have gymnasts, skiers, tennis players. But hey, Isabella, you want to ask Bode a question here?
Hi, I'm a second U14 ski racer, and I was just wondering, how did you manage the stress of races like the Olympics, and how did like nerves like that affect you?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, I think there's good news and bad news. There's no secret weapon for it, is the bad news probably. Ultimately, it's a lot of pressure. You know how small the margins are. If you want to go fast, you have to take risk. Like if you're as good as Michaela Schifrin, great. You're lucky because she's that good that she can just ski so, sound that doesn't make a lot of errors. But if you're me, you're really are rolling the dice every time. And it is nerve wracking, and it is a lot of pressure, and you have to accept that you might fail. That's just part of sports. And certainly as an athlete, you're gonna that already, but you'll continue to grow into that. A very successful ski racer wins maybe 5% of their races, right? And you're one of the best in history if you can continue that onto the World Cup. So 95% of the time you're not winning. So that's just good framework to have your head around, even at a young age. At a young age, you expect to beat people more often, maybe. You should still keep that same sort of ratio in your mind. But the good news is that as nervous as you get now for your big races, whether it's a state championship or just a race at home in front of your family or friends, or on a hill you like or a hill you hate, you won't actually get much more nervous than that ever, regardless of the stage you're on. It's proportional to where you are at that moment. For you, that's your biggest race of your life, and your nerves are going to reflect that. It's at the highest level. The competitors, you're there. By the time you get to the Olympics or World Cup, your skills are much higher. All the athletes you're racing against. To get there, you have to have accomplished certain things. So everything is all in the same ratio in a way. So it's not more. I was just as nervous when I was 8 racing in my first Roland Peabody race at Cannon Mountain as I was racing my first Olympics or my last Olympics. And that's just, you're sort of, you see the world through what you see it through. And your biggest race, if you were to race in the Olympics right now, you might be more nervous than you were at your state championship, but honestly, you'd be shocked. It wouldn't be that different, right? I mean, you can't get that much more nervous. I can say that because I was probably as nervous as anybody, but that's where you have to think ahead, do the preparation. As long as you prepare the best you can, you'll have this underlying confidence when you get in the gate of like, okay, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. We'll find out. But at least I've done everything I can to prepare myself for this moment so that I can do the best that I can. And then ultimately the chips fall where they will, right? There's going to sometimes be people better than you. Sometimes the weather goes sideways. Sometimes your ski falls off. Like there's a million possibilities, but you have to do the parts that you can control, prepare yourself as well as you can, and then go for it. As you know, right? I mean, nerves tend to go away right when you kick out of the start gate. You know what I mean? You're all nervous right before. Once it's time to race, that's the whole point. So, the more preparation you do, the more sort of effort you put in before, the easier that becomes. And the more confident you are when you step into the gate that you have what it takes to execute.
Thanks so much. That was helpful. So Isabella, we look forward to seeing you not nervous at the Olympics pretty soon. We'll give it a couple of years. Thanks so much. Mikhail, you're up next. This Bode could definitely be talking a lot about that because we spend a lot of our life talking about a certain sport other than skiing. So Mikhail, do you want to come up and ask Bode your question?
Hi.
Hey.
My question is, I don't do skiing, but I like watch it when the Olympics is coming.
What do you play? What do you play, Mikhail? What's your sport?
I play tennis like Kirk.
Never heard of it. Never heard of that sport.
You literally play it all the time. But my question is that what was your favorite sport as a kid other than skiing?
As a kid, it was tennis for sure. I grew up at a tennis camp. I played from when I was walk, and I loved it. I think the times where I didn't like tennis, which everyone has moments where they don't like tennis, were generally because I
Playing
became
hurt.
frustrated with exactly as I laid out before. The people I was playing against, I felt like I was better than them, but somehow I couldn't beat them, or I couldn't come up with my best tennis at the right times. And that was really frustrating. The format of tennis is so mentally challenging. It's why so many tennis players are such basket cases, is because it's you're looking across the net at somebody and you have your expectations, and you have to somehow put those expectations away and execute. There is no freebies. You can be ranked number 1 and somebody you're playing against can be ranked 300 and they can beat you. You still have to go through each point, and you can be playing great and then things start to turn, and like there's no escape. You can't leave, you can't run away. There's no timeout, and I think there's a lot of really important lessons that I learned for my skiing pursuits through tennis, which was, control the things you can and eliminate expectations. I mean, the less expectations you can have about a point, about a match, about a game, anything, the better you'll be. Those expectations just play in your head. And you've probably dealt with that, right? You have, triple match point. You're like, oh yeah, I'm about to walk off. Those expectations, you start thinking of your celebration, and all of a sudden you get broken and you're down. It's like, everybody knows you got to stay present in that moment. And skiing is really, really good at teaching that direction to other sports, because in skiing, everything happens so quickly. There's no margin for error at all. And you end up sort of understanding that there is no getting ahead of yourself. You have to be right where you are, thinking of the turn that you're in, not 2 turns down the hill. And that's a really important piece for tennis. But yeah, tennis was definitely my favorite. I loved all sports. I love soccer, but tennis, I think, because that challenge was so obvious every time you stepped on the gate onto the court, you had this mental game going on with yourself and with the person you were playing against.
Yeah, thank you.
That's awesome. Nicola, do you want to ask your question? While Nicola's coming up, I will share with the audience a very frustrating point about Bode Miller, is that he happens to be very good at a lot of things. And I will relate that back to school. I'll relate that back to the mental side of who Bode is. And he's always calculating, there's always thinking, but the biomechanics of sport are so similar, and the difference between good and great a lot of times is up here, or it's putting the work in. So that process that we talk about, when you're thinking, and he mentioned it, whether it's a test, whether it's before the Olympics, for a competition, there's actually similarities. And so if you can get it right here, I think that's really, really important. And all right, Nicola, I'm going to ask a question.
So, hello. So I'm not a skier, but I do fencing, swimming, and motocross. But my question was, how did you know skiing was like something you want to pursue further?
Your purpose, taking your passion, making it your purpose.
Yeah. I actually, it wasn't until later that I first read The Alchemist, the book. I don't know if you've read The Alchemist, but it talks about your personal legend. And I really, in hindsight, that resonated so perfectly with me, is like, every person has it in there. They know, as long as they can remove everyone else's input, what your parents tell you, your coaches, everybody else, internally, somehow, what you really would love to do, whether it's, be a jockey in the Kentucky Derby, or be an astronaut, or be a ski racer, or a fencer, or a swimmer. It's or a musician, or anything. And I think it was really clear to me that I wanted to be an athlete. And then as I kind of tried other sports and kind of felt what it was actually like when I was sort of at my best, and again, sort of relative to what Isabel asked, is at my best when I was 11 years old, I could feel what it would be like to be at my best when I was 20 years old. And I think that's something that is maybe, I mean, I think most kids can do it. Like, you know, when you're playing at a level or whatever, in whatever pursuit you have, when you're playing at that level that's sort of above what you can do in reality, like you're in the zone, you're feeling your absolute best. That's how it'll be, regardless of what level you're at. Your skills will improve, you'll get bigger, you'll get stronger. But at the moment, you have a really cool feel for what it'll actually feel like. And that's when I noticed it for skiing. It just was such a unique, individual, personal sort of triumph when I did things. When I was skiing, it felt differently than when I was at my best on a soccer team or when I was at my best on the tennis court. And so that was what kind of defined it. Certainly the appeal of the independence and all that, and the individuality of skiing I liked as well. But it was really a personal thing. I just loved the way it felt when I was able to do something on my skis correctly. I felt how that would be later, and I realized that was the reward in and of itself for me, more than success or you know, money or anything else, prizes. So that's what defined it for me. But I think there's probably a lot of different ways that it'll express itself for the individual. But ultimately, I think eliminating everyone else's expectations, everyone else's sort of opinions, and sort of feeling like what truly feels right, and not just right now, but when you envision yourself in your mind, the hero of your own life at the end, at the top of what you can reach, what does it look like? And that was what it was for me.
Thanks so much, Nicola and Bode. What you just said, we've had, you know, Dr. Lair come up, you know, and speak to our kids at orientation, and talking about that at the end, you know, what really words to you that matter most and you want to live your life. And I think that resonates throughout what we discuss, whether you're going through your professional journey, creating that prospect, gaining perspective, but you really isolated it right there, that, you know, it wasn't, you had your own personal choice, your own personal mission, but again, what you created was something that was truly unique for you, but yet universal at the same time. Like it can be applied across the board. And so I think that that's really important. Leah, there she is. In our leadership class, are you seeing some similarities here? Are you getting a little cross-pollination between what we talk about? Awesome. Well, Leah, meet Bode, Leah.
Hi, Bode. I just wanted to ask, how do you get through tough times, like mentally and physically?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, everyone's going to have them, right? I mean, they happen in some cases like daily or weekly, but certainly anyone in any sport, any pursuit of any sort is going to have those. I think that for me, I had a little toolbox of things that I could rely on. And I probably had an overdeveloped sense of kind of pride or honor, and then it sort of parlayed in with stubbornness as well. And stubbornness was just right next to it on the list of Bode attributes that I had as a young kid. And I would use that. I would say, this sucks, or like, I'm terrible right now. And I'd, you know, get negative, and then I'd be like, but I'm certainly not going to quit. And then I could almost just turn that into, like, you know, a lot of times that kind of frustration, that kind of disappointment, that kind of, it's usually, at least for me, it wasn't so much a drain. It wasn't like I felt like I was just too tired. I was just too frustrated. So then with the frustration came a little bit of anger in a way. And I figured out how to use that anger stuffed in with a bit of stubbornness to actually do more and just kind of grind through it. And ultimately, the one thing that's the most important in any pursuit is that you kind of keep moving forward, right? I mean, there's this saying, like, the first step is the hardest, right? Like, once you're going, you know, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. And that's very true in every part of life. So as long as you're kind of grinding through things and moving forward, you can actually be making mistakes. You can be doing nothing productive in terms of technique, ability, you know, any of that stuff, but you're still actually making progress in a way. You're still learning what not to do then, or you're learning how to persevere, you know, how to persevere through frustration. Though that kind of, I guess, dogged determination, or like ability to just like use whatever skills I had, even if it wasn't inspired motivation and like passion for what I was doing, even if it was just a grind and I was just forcing myself to do it. I had a pretty unique skill set in that regard, and I could just kind of plod through things even when I was, you know, kind of at my lowest. And honestly, I had a lot of those times, and it just that was a huge difference maker for me, was that I never really sat there and pouted for very long. Not that I didn't do that. I certainly sat and pouted plenty, but I didn't do it for a long time. I would kind of sit there and be like, this isn't doing me any good. I gotta at least keep moving. I gotta keep doing something. So, but you know, I deal with it with my kids now. You know, it is frustrating. There's lots of things that are frustrating on a daily basis. So having that kind of that mindset of like, no matter what, I'm gonna keep going.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot. And Leah is
Thank you. Yeah.
Leah pursues a sport that you and I would probably have a difficult time with. That would be gymnastics, which we know is very intense on every level. So we thanks a lot. We're gonna get Joe up here. Joe, I think we may have another. I've seen Joe in some of the classes, some similarities. You're hearing some similar themes. Do you want to come on and ask your question?
Yeah, hello. So my question is, I play tennis, so I'm not actually a ski racer. I'm not like familiar with like the things you do, but
he throws himself down a big mountain. It's really steep. He tries to go really fast.
yeah, so
he does it better than usually everyone in the world, except maybe one or two once in a while.
My question is, are there any like strategies you want to do when you're like going down the slope, like for sports like snowboarding, ski racing, or like canoeing? Are there like, is it just like muscle memory and like technique, or is there like strategies that you want to do while you're going?
No,
Like tennis.
yeah, it's actually, like I said, tennis there's more similarities than differences. Once you really understand both sports, is you generally have to figure out some solution to how everyone has to go around the same gates. Everyone goes out of the same start gate to the same finish line. And ultimately you're trying to figure out how to be faster than everybody else. So depending on your specific situation, your skill set, your ability, your skis, all that, a lot of the time you have to figure out a strategy, an approach of I'm going to go straighter here. I'm going to cut off some distance and try to make a shorter turn. I'm going to take more risk in this space instead of making a big, you've seen it in your car, right? If you come into a turn and your mom or dad's driving and they go too tight in the beginning of the turn, and they're like, oh, they have to brake, and they like, you know, go out in the middle of the road a little bit, or their tire gets off the inside edge of the road because they didn't make just the perfect smooth turn where they should have, and start it when they should have, and end it where they should have. You end up running into huge problems in skiing, you know, and those mistakes cost time. So yes, there's a massive strategy to it. That's primarily how I won races. I was not that good, honestly. My skills weren't up to where most of the other racers were. I was just really good tactically. I could figure out ways to take what I did have in my skill set and apply it and take risk in just the right places, and then not take risk in other places and do just enough. Similar to tennis, right? Like, you can have a great drop shot, and a lot of times if you have a good serve, it's not worth it to sit there and do your drop shot and show that you have this great drop shot. You just hold serve, and then the one time you have a good break point, boom, then you bust out your drop shot. You only need to win those 1 or 2 points to get that one break, and then you win the set, you know. And that's really similar. Is like tennis, a lot of times people see tennis as, let's just beat the ball back and forth, let's show our best stuff, and they want it to look a certain way as opposed to accomplishing the goal. And I think there's a lot of similarities there. The people who are really good at tennis have a strategy, they have a plan, and they know how to be deceptive. They know how to hold back certain things so that they can play them at the right time with the right surprise approach and actually win the points that really matter, right? I mean, you're down 40 love against a great server. It doesn't do you a lot of good to win that 1 point. They're likely to win one of the next 2. Not that you shouldn't try, but that's not the time to pull out your secret weapon. And that's sort of what I did in skiing. Was I always had certain little tricks, and it was really hard to wait till just the right time to pull them out and make sure you utilize them to the most effect.
That's great. Thanks, Joa. We're going to keep going. I feel like the questions being asked are probably better than the questions that I would talk to you about. So let's bring up Catherine Boyle. And I think, look, you can relate everything to academics as well. That's why the uniqueness and the opportunities that ICL and Dwight Global provide are really unique, in that you can think about things the same way, how you prepare for tests, how you approach your education, how you can, it's just similar mindset activities. And actually, when you don't see a connection between things, and Bode's the perfect person we met. Bode has a visual that can connect soccer to tennis to skiing to, everything in his life, from traveling to different countries. It's always being the observer, always questioning, always seeing synergy. So it was interesting. But I will let Catherine come up here if you want to ask Bode a question. Go ahead. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi, I'm in the car, so I'm sorry if it's kind of hard to hear. I am a ski racer. I'm going in as a first year U16 this year. And my question is, how do you deal with the fear of staring down a really steep race course that can be potentially dangerous if you don't handle it exactly right? Because I have a lot of problems with that, where I'll be looking down a really steep course and I'll psych myself out even before the race begins.
Yeah, fear. The only thing you have to fear is fear itself. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a real thing. Generally, again, it comes down to preparation, and it comes down to those incremental steps that you take prior to that. So unfortunately, I don't have a magic silver bullet for you when you're standing in the start gate. At that point, that ship has sailed. You got to use your skills the best you know how. A lot of it is confidence. Certainly you can get your confidence into a good place, and you can do mental activities, mental exercises to get your brain to be willing to take that risk. But ultimately, if your skills aren't good enough, you are legitimately taking a real risk by going down something that's steep and you're going fast and the forces are really high that are on your body. So in my mind, most of that, the best way to approach it is prior to that moment, is trying your best to acclimate yourself to really steep, icy, difficult terrain. Find the steepest things you can find and ski down them, and then try different things. And just the more you do it, the more used to it your brain will get, the more your confidence will grow, and the more your skills will grow. You'll understand, wow, when I'm on something that's steep, I have to do these things differently than I would do on something that was slightly less steep. And it is exponential, you start getting up to things that are really steep, and there's certain parts that just don't work the same as something that's even just slightly less steep. So it is a real thing. And for me, that was a real part of it. Not so much the steepness, but the risk I knew I had to take when I was kicking out of the start gate, because of where my ability was, where my equipment was, and I still wanted to try to win races. I was taking, in some cases, much more risk than anyone else in the race. And that was really mentally challenging. But ultimately, I had good trust and faith in my body's ability to withstand crashes or mishaps. And that allowed me to say, okay, this is how I have to do it. This is what I've chosen to do. And now is the time. And over the course of several years, I did certainly modify my preparation. I got more and more acclimated towards certain things that were intimidating for me. And that was just specific training about that one thing of like, this keeps messing with my mind and I keep making mistakes or it freaks me out. Let's practice it and practice it and practice it until it becomes normal. And then it wasn't such a big deal. But again, it's, I won't downplay it. Skiing is intimidating and it's dangerous, and there's no easy way to do that. The best thing is get really strong, get a lot of training in, and acclimate your brain so that you have the confidence to know that you can execute on that steep, nasty, difficult course.
And there are a lot of steep, nasty, difficult courses in every aspect of life, and how you approach that is really critical. Isabella, who asked a question earlier, did a follow-up and said, how do you find the discipline to work hard in your studies, at school when you're so focused on training? Yeah, I'd like to say that that's why we created ICL. a minute and then we'll get to
Yeah.
Sarah's question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that the academic program that I was in as a high school student was not terribly strong. And it took me about till 10th grade, end of 10th grade before I really, I think, understood how beneficial it was. And it was actually through tennis that it actually happened. I just, the way I was approaching studying was just get it done. You know, I didn't take a lot of pride in it. I wasn't, you know, meticulous. And it wasn't until that spring that year where I won the main state championships in tennis, and I beat a guy who was much better than me in that tournament. And I realized that the reason I beat him was actually because I'd really kind of ramped up my academics, and I was just so much more detail oriented about little things, and less just raw, go out there and get it done. And I think that was important. I actually liked learning. I liked the process. I just didn't like the busy work. And so I think as you look at your academics, I think it's probably important to take the multi-tiered approach of like, look, this stuff is super valuable. You have to get it done anyway. As a point of personal pride, it'll help your confidence, it'll help your integrity, it'll help your honor and your sort of your pride in yourself if you do it well. And those are all really powerful weapons in anything you pursue. Anyone who has a lot of pride and who has a lot of self-respect and discipline and focus is going to be better than somebody who has less of those things with the same everything else. So, I mean, I think it's part of the toolkit of a really strong person in every single aspect that I've ever seen. So why not develop it doing something that you have to do anyway? And it really is probably one of the best platforms to develop those type of attributes.
Awesome. Sarah, do you want to come on? And I think it's been about almost a year since you got to meet Bode. Sarah is climbing up the ranks. I think her rankings improved a lot since our first Bode webinar.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for coming on. So I'm a tennis player, and I know that skiing is kind of like tennis because it's like more of an individual sport, and it's not really a team sport where you can get energized from your coach and team members while you're competing. What is the keyword or key sentence that you tell yourself when you're competing to energize yourself and to come back?
Yeah, I always loved about tennis that I sensed it lots of times that like I'd be sitting down or I'd be in a changeover, I'd be after a point, and I would be like, I'd just be playing mental tricks with myself. Like, oh my God, this guy is like, he's not tired at all. He's just like so confident. And then I would always kind of play that mental game of like, wait a second, like I can probably show him the same thing that's going to intimidate him just by my little nuanced behaviors, right? That kind of little smirk, smug, little like, you know, like a little, just
But
little.
you and I've never done that to each other.
Little things that I felt like I was making assumptions in my own head. I was letting sort of my fear or my imagination dictate things as opposed to the things I could actually control. And that I think in tennis is incredibly powerful. You know, the ability to relentlessly shake off points, right? Person hits a great shot, you know, hey, great shot, you know, do it again, you know, and ultimately, you know, that like that gets on people, that gets in their head because they can be winning and they're like, man, this person just doesn't get frustrated. They don't go away. They just keep working and keep grinding. And that also plays into the same thing that Kirk was saying of like, stay engaged, keep thinking, right? The match isn't over until the match is over. And there's always ways to figure out your opponent. You know, there's historically, there's people who are nowhere near as good as people they've beat, right? And come back from match points, and it happens all the time. And it typically happens because of what's between your ears, not what's below there, you know? And that sort of mentality, I think they play really well together, is like controlling yourself and making sure that you do the things that you know can add to that. And then at the same time, consciously thinking and not necessarily making the other person less than they are, but certainly not allowing your brain to imagine that they're invincible and that they're just that much better and all that stuff. Because that's a really, you know, and they you know, that's a hard thing to do sometimes because your brain wants to do that. And you have to be like, hey, that's a regular person over there. They get frustrated just as quickly as anybody else, and they can be beaten just like anybody else.
Thank you.
There you go, Sarah. All right, we have time for a couple more questions, and we'll get back. Bode is we all from ICL, from Dwight Global, wish you a big congratulations for another baby coming on board.
Coming right up.
Bode, world champion with the family too. Hi, Ann. Do you want to ask Bode a question? Bode, Ann Bode.
Yes. Hello, my name is Anne Valerie. I like to ski, play tennis, and swim. And my question is, what was the happiest moment of your sport career? Was it when you won or when you received an award?
I think my happiest moment, skiing is really strange because when you get to the finish line of a ski race, you're exhausted and you feel generally terrible because your legs are tired, you can't breathe. But still, I think in 2007 in Wengen, Switzerland, I won a downhill. And Wengen is a really unique place. It would be like, it's kind of like winning the US Open in a way, but maybe more similar to winning Wimbledon, because Wimbledon has all that crazy history. It's on grass, it's a unique surface. Wengen is a 2-minute and 35-second downhill course. It goes like, 3.5 miles. It's on this crazy big mountain right next to the Eiger. And it's just got this crazy history. And it's about the least suited course to me, to my ability. It was the most difficult course for me to win because of how I was, what my fitness was, my skis, my skiing, all that. So when I won that year, I got to the finish and I just felt like, plus I took this insane risk in the last 15 seconds that really I didn't have to take. And I kind of knew I didn't have to take. I felt like I'd skied really well and I should have not done it, but being stubborn and being who I was like, no, this is my chance. I'm going to do everything I can. And I went like extra crazy through these last 2 turns and it worked, and it should have not worked. And those little things versus getting the award or winning the race, the difference that race was for me, had I not taken that risk in the last 15 seconds, I still would have won the race. But the difference was huge. The fact that I still took that risk, I still was myself in that moment and got to do something that I thought maybe I'd never have that chance again. I really used that moment to the maximum that it could be. And yeah, that race, I kind of crashed. I jumped down this whole thing into the finish and my legs just collapsed. I kind of crashed into the finish line. And I just remember being like, even though I was in terrible pain with my legs and so tired, I was like, that was the happiest I've ever been in the finish line of a ski race. And yeah, that was a super unique one. And like I said, it was somewhat to do with the race winning it because it was such number one, but it was also the way that I did it in that last little bit.
Thank you so much, Ann. Thanks, Ann. For everyone here, we want to keep doing our webinars, making them great. We'd love you to fill out a short little survey about how we can make them better, what we can do. It's really fun having Bode, but I think, we talk a lot, and I think that your questions are the most fun to see what how you can relate what you're doing. You're all in very unique situations with very specific goals, and to be able to talk to people who have been there, experienced it, maybe not even in your sport, but can share these insights. I mean, this is what the pillar of perspective is all about. We have another, I'll do a last question, then we'll wrap up. Ariel asked us, how do you deal with being sidelined after an injury and how you cope, mentally and physically? And that's obviously in today's world, huge part of any sport these days is there is injury. Oh, sorry, Ariel, I asked the question for you. I didn't know. But feel free to ask Bode yourself. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it was just that. And I'm not in the same sport. I actually ride horses. That's my sport. So I'm just wondering how you cope after an injury, because obviously with horses, you have a fair share of injuries that happen.
Yeah.
So
I'll interrupt and say, Bode knows a lot of it. This is why Bode is always great to have as a webinar, because Bode happens to not only love horses, but know an awful lot about riding as well, and this is not a far off question for him. So sorry, go ahead, Ariel.
Yeah, it's it's a really sad reality, right? Of not just sports, but of life in general, is that things happen, right? We're not an inherently durable race of species, right? We break easy, and we like to do things that are risky. Horses, you're jumping around with 1,000-pound animal, jumping over things, and there's a million ways for you to get hurt and for horses to get hurt. But in this case, when you talk about coping with it, I always like to try, as hard as it is, right? First, you got to be accepting that it's going to be frustrating. You're going to get bummed out. Like, that's a very normal thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But you should also think of it as a really useful time, a really important time for reflection, planning, adaptation, adjustments, and growth in other areas that maybe you can't focus on as much when you're not hurt, right? There's certain things that it takes a little bit of discipline to kind of remove yourself from the emotional situation, which is you feel bad for yourself, you're bummed out, everything's happening without you, you're missing time. But then remove yourself from that and be like, okay, what are the things that I know would help me that I generally don't commit enough time to when I'm fit and training the way that I can when I'm not injured, right? And that was huge for me, because I was hurt when I was in my early 20s. I blew out my knee, and I'd been like on the go since I was 15. Like, I hadn't been hurt. All I was doing was racing, training. And I'd never really spent the time to look at videos, watch myself in videos, analyze like what were the causes of these crashes, and how could I fix them? How could I prepare? How could I build training scenarios that would lead me to be better at avoiding those, at recovering from them, at minimizing the damage done when I make them again in the future? And I tell you, I came back from that, and that's when I started winning races. And I'm not sure that I would have started winning in that 2001, 2002 season had I not been injured the year before. I would have just kept going at the same sort of pace and just just keep getting better. And like, there's a time where you need to sort of step back, do a long-term analysis. How have I evolved? What have I missed? What am I good at? What am I not good at? How can I sort of make all those puzzle pieces fit more tightly together and be more successful? And it's a gift. Honestly, again, it happened in soccer for me in this case. I used to be so frustrated when I get pulled out of a soccer game. Like, I'd be playing and I get subbed. And I was like, I'd sit there on the side, the whole time. And then I started being like, wait a second, I should be watching the stuff that I can't watch while I'm actually playing. Because when you're actually playing, you're kind of tracking the ball. And I started watching the guys who were marking me, watching what they did, watching their patterns, watching different moves. And then I started being like, oh my God, now, like, I sub back in 5 minutes later and I've got this whole new information set that I can then apply right to the field. And I would have never had that had I not been out of the game. And I think maybe that's an analogy that'll help you, is like, it's a useful time. And even though it's involuntary, you didn't choose to have it, you owe it to yourself to try to make the best out of it. Otherwise, you're just wasting time. And that's one thing that you'll never get back, is that time. The people who are successful are people who use their time as best they can. And everybody has down moments, but you just try to minimize them and shorten them as much as you can, and then get back to being productive in whatever way you can.
That's awesome. I think hopefully that's helpful. And
Thank you.
with the horses. And if you are having an injury, definitely try that Be Strong. It is great. I mean, Bode.
It works for healing too. Like, you'll get stronger certainly, but because it stimulates this crazy circulation and endorphins and enzymes and proteins that would normally go fix damaged muscle fibers from a hard workout, but there's actually no damage from that because you're not doing a hard workout. You're just tricking your body. It fixes old injuries like unbelievable. I mean, you'll heal up so much quicker.
That's awesome. Thanks, Ariel. Well, I mean, we're gonna wrap up here in a minute. I mean, we covered a lot of ground, but again, for all of our students, families, I mean, this is what Bode loves to do, and we're just so thankful to have him as is not only, you know, an ICL champion, and really he's been involved with the nonprofit for so many years now. To kind of go on this next level journey together is critical. And if you ever have any questions, I mean, he is really a great resource for anything. And I think, you know, when we meet and you have classes like your performance psychology or leadership, or you're looking at things and you get stuck, you know, there are different ways to look at things and, you know, try to use some of these elements of time management, of energy management, of switching it on sort of on the mental side, some of those tricks that Bode did talk about. And I guess if you want to have the last word and maybe give a little advice or anything that you would think of before you become a father again for a lot of times.
No, I mean, I've said it before, but I think, you know, one of the great attributes that young people have that older people tend to lose a bit of is their imagination. And the power of your imagination should never be taken for granted, but I think a lot of people do. When you're in stuck points, when you're frustrated, when you're struggling with something, or even just when you're trying to search for motivation, in a game, in a match, you have a changeover in tennis, use your imagination. Don't always just rely on what's in front of you. I've told the story many times about how much I used my imagination to sort of manipulate how I felt about things. And you can, you know, there's no embarrassment to it. Nobody's going to know what you're imagining. So imagine anything that works for you to get your head into the place that's the most effective to do what it is you're trying to do. A lot of times reality is not a super friendly, conducive place to really good attitude, right? You're down 6-1, 5-0 in a tennis match, right? Reality is not going to help you right there. You're not going to be like, oh, hey, let's do this. But you can just imagine something different and get yourself that little bit of boost and go out there and play the last game like there is no scoreboard, like you just want to go play. And I think that's a really powerful tool that I'd like to leave you guys with, is practice that. Don't just, you know, hear it, you know, actually try it on regular things every single day. You have imaginations that are jamming all day long. Use them for something productive.
I love that. If you have 2 more minutes, just a speed date. I did miss 2 of the questions I feel bad about, so I will ask them here. It was really fun to have our ICL students with the Dwight Global students. I know we're getting near early exam time, so it's heating up in the classroom, and I remember touring Bode around Dwight years ago before he played in Central Park. You know, really setting this whole thing in motion. So thank you to all the Dwight Global families and ICL. And I think that there's the last 2 questions. One is, Drew Graham, what was it like for you when you were 14 trying to decide? You had to make that decision at some point, right? Tennis v skiing. How was that in your mind, and how would you sort of have someone cope with that today?
Yeah, those were big decisions, but they honestly weren't. They didn't feel that challenging to me. I have a unique ability to look at all the factors, and then when I make a decision, I don't go and second guess myself. I don't go waffling around unless new information comes to light. So I said, look, here's the reality. Tennis, I'd have to move to a warmer climate. It's going to beat my body up. Am I going to be big enough to be a successful tennis player? At that time, I was convinced that being over 6'2" was kind of critical. You needed a big enough serve, and it's not the case. Obviously, we see tons of smaller players being unbelievable. But I once I made the decision, I just closed it out, and unless new information came up, which it didn't, you know. So it really wasn't that hard for me. I knew, again, I had that good internal compass where I wasn't doing it for anyone else. I wasn't really taking other people's advice. I wasn't doing it for defiant reasons because people were telling me to do something else. I was truly like, look, this is what I feel like I can do and I can be good at and I really enjoy. And I'm willing to take the responsibility if I'm wrong. But that's a hard one. It really is. I mean, I don't mean to make it sound easy. I know it's one of the harder things that you'll face as a young person is those type of decisions. But, whatever you choose, make sure it's something you really enjoy the process of, not just enjoy the outcome, because that's critical.
That's such a good point. I mean, we talk about process, and whichever you commit to, just know that the glory comes at the end. Like, it's not going to be a short road. So when you get older and you're our age, you start to look back and you don't think about the matches won or the medals, the tournaments. It's like the process was the journey. And if you're not going to love that process, because it's going to be ugly, gnarly, painful at times, but if you don't love that, you should make probably a different decision, because it's not going to be all, hockey stick growth and winning all the time. So that's a good way to think about it. We're going to round this out, because for those of you here that have met Bode before, talked to him, he is this not a one-trick pony. We've talked about equestrian, tennis, skiing, soccer. So it may be apropos that we end on a golf question, from a question from a golfer, just to like round it out. So Eva, she wrote, how have you developed endurance with the mental side of sports? Because they're all mental. I play golf, which requires focus for a long period of time. How have you eliminated distractions and maintained your focus? That'll be it.
Yeah, I think honestly, it's a really good platform to talk about focus, because in golf, tennis, I think, is actually much more demanding in terms of focus, because during a point can last anywhere from 2 seconds to a minute.
Points are longer.
Yeah, I mean, in Kirk's, in my case, sometimes a few minutes. And you really do have to stay fairly focused that whole time. Golf is great in that you really only have to be super focused for your pre-shot and then your shot. As soon as the club meets the ball, there's nothing else you can do. You can talk to the ball and you can yell at it and you can do whatever, but it's kind of going where it's going, unless you're playing Tiger Woods, in which case you can push the button really fast and make it curve around. But I assume you're talking about real golf, in which case the ball is already gone and it's time to relax. It's time to stop focusing, just let it go. And then practice that of like, how do you get yourself from a relaxed, non-focused, chill moment where you let your body rest, you let your mind rest, and then you can ramp up your focus quickly and ratchet it in. Because one of the things that's interesting about golf, and you'll figure this out if you haven't already, you need a different type of focus for a drive that's a wide open fairway, for a drive that's a really narrow fairway, for a drive that's going right to left or left to right, than you do for a chip, for a long iron shot, or for a putt, or for a sand shot, right? Each shot inevitably is a different type of focus. They're all going to be intense, but you want different things in your head. You want to be soft hands and relaxed for one, where you want to be, really powerful and dynamic for another. Your margin can be bigger for one. If the fairway is wide open, you can actually let it go a little bit. All those are different mindsets. And I would encourage you to really think of it that way. Don't try to stay focused for 4.5 hours out there. You'll burn yourself out, and it's a waste of energy, because you don't need to be focused in between there. And you're ultimately going to be more tired at the end of the round than you should be. You want to try to just focus when you need to and in the way that you need to, and then relax, and then practice ramping that focus back up, and then relax. In the beginning, you might have to start ramping up your focus fairly quickly after you've hit your previous shot, because you might not be that good at it. You might just kind of stay in that mode, but ultimately you want to try to extend those rest periods as long as you can in between your shots. You'll end up being much fresher at the end of your rounds, and you'll play better.
Well, that's so interesting, the focus, because in a way, I mean, that also applies to your academics, right? I mean, the traditional school to be like, I have to focus on a math test, then it's a science experiment. So, that ability to, Dr. Lair talked about energy management, how you manage that, and the ability to focus and then let it go, and breath work, and just being able to do that is so big. So I just want to thank Bode again from all of us, because the man who knows a lot about a lot, not a one-trick pony here. We'll probably have to play a game one day for stumping Bode, because it's very fun to be able to talk to someone who really has a depth of knowledge about so many subjects and ties them together, because that really is a big, if you can learn that skill right now with the ground we covered, and their sort of universal lessons. So Bode, thanks so much. I can't wait to see you soon. Good luck with the family, with the birth, and everything. And we will be trying to apply this on the course mountain together soon, I hope.
Absolutely. Thanks, you guys. Good luck.
Thanks a lot. Take care, everyone. Thanks a lot. All right, make sure to take our survey. Thanks, guys. Take the survey if you can before you leave. Thanks, everybody, and see you in class. A lot of you I can see here, so appreciate it. We'll see you very soon. Bye.